All right, cool.
Cool.
So here we are. We're here with Phil. Um, Phil and I guess, have been emailing for a very long time. And I titled this video Understanding Science because I feel like that's probably something that, in my opinion, maybe Phil is missing, an understanding of general science. So that's my opinion. And I'm coming into this with a hope that we can talk about science and treat this as a learning moment. Okay. So, Phil, why don't you introduce yourself and just say some things that you want to say?
Okay. All right. Well, great to meet you at last, Dan, after our many spats on email. And yeah, I mean, just to explain my doubts of a lot of science, not all of science. I'll try and be as quick as possible because I know Dan doesn't like me getting off subject, but I'm not getting off subject so much here. I'm just explaining why I do have doubts. Now, since the early 80s, I'm 60 this year. Since the early 80s, I've been very fascinated with health and diet. And I studied enormously. I didn't study in the classical sense, but I studied many different disciplines. And I wrote books on it. I thought that I knew everything about diet, and I was very fascinated with Ayurveda and all that sort of thing, which I completely misinterpreted, which is a very old science. And I decided that, you know, vegetarianism was the way to go, and plant-based eating, all that sort of thing. And I ended up very sick in 2010 with lots of metabolic issues, heart, liver, kidneys. I ended up with the killer of them all, really, which was psoriatic arthritis, which crippled me and ended my drumming career for a couple of years. And I had to look at what I thought I knew, and none of it was working. And so then I started looking at the science of it. I started going to medical doctors, that kind of thing. And I realized that pretty much everything I thought I knew about health and diet was completely upside down. And this was backed up by studies. I mean, the misapprehensions about it, misconceptions about it was backed up by these studies that are put out by the same kind of people who put out, excuse me, our health advice. And when I looked at actual studies that weren't really financed by the big food and big pharma companies, I found a very different thing, which pointed towards what I had found and the way I healed myself. And I had to look at parallel sciences like anthropology, like deuterium depletion, like circadian biology, you know, and then you can start to see that really everything is upside down. Now, I've promised Dan I'm not going to go into all my ins and outs of diet. There's no point here, just about my attitude to the science. And everything really, all the studies that are put out there are very biased, absolutely wrong, totally against our history as a species, as humans. And then I started looking at the science behind the COVID business. And I kind of smelt the same rat. And I'd like to just use one little example before we go on. I won't go into, like I said, all the ins and outs of diet and how, you know, I think even fruits and vegetables are unnecessary, and these are the things we've been told. So, you know, my diet is, as far as most people think, extremely extreme, as fully carnivore. I'm still here 6 years from doing that and totally healthy. So at the beginning of this COVID thing, the WHO put out something saying, here is how to stay healthy from COVID. And we must not eat animal fats, and we must eat seed oils. Now, whatever anybody thinks about diet, and a lot of people will disagree with me, obviously you haven't looked into the carnivore thing, but the most deadly thing in our diets is seed oils, without a doubt. These things were made as soap making additives, they were made as machine lubricants, and they've created the heart disease epidemic, along with processed carbohydrates, obviously. But this is what's being pushed by the WHO. I would like to understand how I can possibly trust the same sort of people who put out the information about COVID when the evidence of my eyes as well, and the many contacts we have now turning round against the narrative, are saying something totally different. So I don't throw anything out. I look at everything. Dan, I think at times you thought that I don't, but I honestly do. I'm just not convinced, mate. I cannot trust the people who say many, many, many things, but that one thing in particular, that is genocide, to tell people to eat seed oils. Why should I trust them when they tell me that I should be taking a vaccine and that's the way forward? That's what I'd like to know. So thank you for the opportunity for the intro.
Okay, so you don't trust the WHO because you think that they put out incorrect diet recommendations. I never heard them say eat seed oil to stay healthy against COVID.
I did. Yeah,
Okay.
they were saying vegetable oils, you must eat vegetable oils and not animal fats. I mean, we've been eating animal fats for millennia.
I never heard them say that. You can provide a link to them saying that if you like, but I'm not aware of anyone.
They say it in general, but they sort of co-opted the COVID thing anyway. I mean, this is the standard narrative. We should eat vegetable oils. We should eat, you know, whole grains, all the most dangerous things for the human body. And so now I've got to trust them with something else. I mean, that's not just the one instance, but that is the most glaring one, because everybody.
So
sorry, go on.
So like I said, you can send a link to that if you like, but so getting into trusting them on COVID science, whatever, vaccine recommendations, things like that. So you said you don't throw anything out, you look at it all. So I guess what have you looked at in terms of the vaccine recommendations? Are you just discounting anything they say because you don't like their diet recommendations, or are you looking at it and evaluating it?
I'm looking at it and evaluating it because I've looked at the standard stuff, and I'm sorry, I don't retain studies and I don't collect them. I don't even collect them for diet, really, because I prefer practical applications. But the stuff that I'm seeing outside of the mainstream science is more convincing to me, simply because it's not just their diet recommendations, it's every single recommendation. You know, now we're getting into some very, very dodgy territory with really, you've got to admit, there's police states coming in, there's concentration camps being built, there's, you know, the response to it is absolutely off the charts wrong. And I think that if they addressed the main comorbidities and whatever, which they're not doing at all, and which kill far more people than COVID, even assuming the figures are correct, which I don't really believe from what I've seen from my frontline contacts. If they're right, they would have much more success of showing people how to become healthy. Whereas the people that we're supposed to trust are the ones who are making the billions out of it. I know, I'm sure you've heard all this before. I can see you getting fed up.
So let's talk about you know, you're talking about looking at everything, not throwing everything out, but it seems like you're really emphasizing what you see in your day-to-day, your own personal experience. Is that right?
Well, it's not just my own personal experience. I mean, we are in touch with many, many, many doctors on the front line because of what we do. And I won't mention what we do because I suppose you don't want a quack like me advertising my services online. But, you know, for example, we have a pharmacist at the moment who's come across and is finding, he says now probably 90% of his colleagues are seeing through it, but they're too frightened to speak out. Because they're going to lose their livelihood and whatever. And we're just seeing this across the board now. I think that even if you're right about everything, the responses are hugely, hugely wrong and very frightening for humanity.
Right. Okay. So I hear that a lot. People are afraid to speak out. I don't buy it. I know plenty of scientists. I know plenty of doctors. I don't see that repeated. So, but we can compare our personal experiences, right? You know, supposed experts who are afraid to speak out. I know plenty of experts who are well aware of the science and would disagree. So we could go back and forth with our personal experiences all day. It doesn't get us anywhere. So how do we actually find out what's true? What's going on in the world? Where do you look to find that?
Well, Dan, I think that you shot yourself in the foot a little bit in a recent video where you've constantly told me on email that personal experience and anecdotes are pretty useless. I would agree until there's tens of thousands of them, you know, and I'm seeing that with the diet thing and whatever. And you said on this personal experience, you were talking about how do we know about the transmission and how the vaccine helps that. Well, there aren't any studies at the moment, but we see it in the community. And my jaw dropped. And I was like, Dan, this is what we're looking at. We've got to look
Oh no,
at
there
that.
are studies. There definitely are studies showing that vaccination reduces transmission in the community. It was studied in the community.
Well, you actually said, you know, that we're seeing that in the community, and that's what I've been saying all along. That we are
That's
seeing
what
it in the community.
because those who have studied it in a community setting see that.
That isn't quite what you said, but
That
I
that's
see
exactly what I said, and I linked the study in the description. So did you look at that study?
No, I didn't, not in that particular video, but I looked at a lot of
Okay.
studies that you've sent
Okay.
me.
Okay.
But
So
I did hear that you were saying we see it in the community. And it
yeah,
was something to some aspect of it where you said there aren't any actual studies at the moment, but we can see it in the community.
I never
And
said that.
okay, I don't think that I would have picked up on that if it hadn't have made my jaw drop. But I think that it's important that we do see this in the community. And you know, since the beginning of this COVID thing, maybe I'm in a lucky area, although they do say the northwest of England is hard hit, but that's not what my partner has seen, as who is a nurse in hospitals. And I don't really know anybody who's had any particular difficulty with COVID, or long COVID, as they call it, any more than they have with the after effects of flu, if they don't know how to take care of their health. But
So
now,
is the thing here, sorry, is the thing here that you don't believe it because you don't personally know anybody who has dealt with it? Is that right? What about people who would tell you that they know people who have suffered from it, or people who have lost? Would you deny their experience? Like,
no,
how does that work? How does that work in your
no,
mind?
no, I wouldn't deny their experience at all. And I wouldn't in any other year, but I'm not seeing a difference from any other year. However,
You're not
I
seeing a
am,
difference in any
I
other
am
year.
seeing a huge difference since the jabs. And I've had personal friends who've had strokes. I've had people who have had myocarditis. They've had problems. I just don't think it's the way to go. We're seeing huge amounts of issues with the reactions to the vax. And there is this, you know, the VAERS thing, which you discount, and the yellow card system. I think you're not too keen on that, but there are so many, you know, if there was like 1,000 reports or something like that, but there's so many.
So I'm sharing this with you. You don't believe that this year has been any different from any other year.
I think there were spikes. I think there were spikes during the care home thing when they murdered people with midazolam and morphine, and we're seeing spikes there.
Take a look at this for a second. Take a look at this. This is excess deaths by country. So these are figures that are compared to a 5-year baseline. And the blue line, I believe, is 2021, and the red line is 2020. These are excess deaths relative to a 5-year baseline. The United States experienced 640,000 excess deaths at the time of this publishing. You can see the figures for any other country that's listed here. So when you see this and you say you consider everything, when you consider this, what do you think?
I think that I've seen conflicting graphs. I think that I've seen a lot of graphs. You know, one of the guys in our team that I work with puts together a lot of data.
So how do you figure out which graph is correct?
I don't know, Dan. I really don't know.
Well, then why are you saying that why are you saying that there's nothing? Why are you telling your audience, and you have an audience, why are you telling them that there's nothing if you don't know how to figure out what's true?
Well, I'm saying that I'm not saying that there's nothing. I'm saying that as far as I've seen, there's been spikes, and a lot of the spikes.
You told me that it's no different from any other year.
Yeah, but it depends in what circumstance. You know, early on, I think, well, I know because I've seen many hospital handover sheets, many you know, the medical records with COVID tacked on the end. They didn't know, they were in a panic. They didn't know what was going on, and it was tacked on. There weren't any autopsies. And
there are plenty of autopsies early on.
Yeah, there are now. I think I sent you one from, you know, reports from pathologists who are showing a lot of damage to the heart muscle, you know, after the vax. So yeah,
that wasn't published. That was I believe Sushri Bhakti, who I've debunked several times on my channel. He didn't publish those. He
I
didn't
know
publish that. He didn't show any
you
actual
publish a lot
data.
of stuff, Dan, but you know, you debunk a lot of stuff, right? And that's great, you know. But
But
there are so
I
many
just want to.
waves and waves of people who you haven't debunked yet who are coming out all the time and speaking out against it. And not just people who are as extreme as, say, Stefan Lanka, you know, and I hope he's right. I do, but I don't know. I don't know at all. I mean, there was a very, very wise doctor, professor, I think, once, and I forget the name, I forget which med school, but he used to say to the new students, and again, I forget the percentage, I'm not as good with figures as you, but let's say 50%, but he said, well, 50% of what you're going to learn in med school is rubbish, but we just don't know which 50% yet. And I put it to you that over history, we have had the basis of things completely wrong many, many times. You know, the flat earth thing, for example, if you like. And so, you know, before somebody calls me a flat earther. And so, you know, things have become accepted that previously were not true. And not everything about virology adds up to me in my logic, in my heart, in my intuition. I'm sorry, I do rely on those quite a lot. And it just doesn't really quite add up. If there are excess deaths, I cannot say what they were down to. I really can't, because a lot of people are saying that many of those figures and those COVID cases were not accurate. The flu disappeared, for example.
So Phil, you might be misunderstanding something. Those graphs, those are excess deaths. Those are not COVID deaths. Those are just excess deaths above the norm. This was not connected to measuring COVID cases or anything like that. These are just deaths that occurred way beyond the norm. So the question is, what caused that? Well, those excess deaths do track with cases and deaths of COVID. They track with the waves that we saw. They are consistent with the actual COVID numbers, but the excess deaths are independent, an independent figure. So if you have another reason that you can argue reasonably that caused all those excess deaths, then you might have something. But I haven't heard anything.
This is the reason that I think if there were spikes at certain points, and assuming that you're right, and there are, they also track the times when there was a lot of people being murdered by the midazolam and morphine horrors in the care homes. And the average age of those deaths,
people are not being murdered by those. People are not being murdered in care homes.
I've seen it firsthand. It was quite horrific at the beginning of this thing. I mean, there's lawsuits being brought against the English government for that at the moment.
Lawsuits can be brought against practically anything.
I know. I'll accept that. I'll accept.
But these are, let's see, in the UK.
What were the average age of these deaths? They were something like above the national average, weren't they, with the sort of COVID-related deaths? So the same people who would have died in any other year have died pretty much of that. I understand.
These are 110,000 excess deaths at the time this paper was written in the UK. Is that acceptable?
No, but I don't think the measures are. I think they could have. Let's assume.
What's wrong with the measures? What's wrong with the measures?
Your figures are absolutely perfect. Let's assume that for the moment, and they might well be. So, why did they not tell people how to be in the top 1%, let alone the top 99% that were safe pretty much from any serious damage from COVID? Instead,
how do you
destroyed the economy. How do you do that? You make sure that they have low cellular deuterium. You make sure they have high vitamin D. You make sure that they have no metabolic issues. You make sure they get
how do you know all that?
You know, to make sure. How do I know all that? Because I've not seen anybody get into any serious trouble who was in a very good state of health.
So you've measured the deuterium and vitamin D and all that stuff in all of the people who have been fine with COVID in your eyes, and you've compared it to people who have died of COVID. Is that right?
No, I haven't. You've got me on that one.
So then why? So why are you telling your audience that that's how you save yourself when you don't know?
Because I'm using my intuition from seeing in my many groups. I probably have, say, 40,000 or so on social media. I'm not seeing.
If I'm in a life-threatening,
very healthy.
So if I have a life-threatening illness and I need surgery, I need medication, I need something, am I going to trust someone who is going by intuition or somebody who actually knows what they're doing?
I would go by somebody who's actually had deep personal experience of it, and in their many clients and their many contacts have also got very deep personal experience with phenomenal.
Define deep personal experience.
I fixed myself of many things that I was told were incurable, that were made worse by medications. So that's my personal experience, but I'm not
So
putting that
something worked for you, so it should work for everyone else?
Well, it does, because it's our natural diet, Dan. It's our natural diet and how we're supposed to be as human beings.
Okay,
You know?
so we're just establishing how you kind of go about figuring things out and how you go about deciding what to tell your audience. And you're saying that you trust your intuition. You don't, you consider everything, you don't throw anything out, but you only really go by your intuition.
No, I go by what's really working. And I believe that in a lot of times people are ahead of the science. It's funny, the other day I saw the first study with 2,200 people or something on the carnivore diet that's never been done before. Right? People slam it and they go, to me, all the civilizations have eaten like that are a big enough study for me. But now Harvard have done one with absolutely extraordinary results. And I see that and I go, yay, great, because I know that from my personal experience and from studying anthropology. And nobody has a financial interest in that really in anthropology, but they do in all the diet things. You know, the big food companies, they want to feed us all that crap because there is a far bigger profit in it. And the pharma companies want us to take vaccines because there's no real profit for them in saying exactly how to get well. And they must know that now, Dan. They don't sit there thinking that seed oils are healthy. They're still pushing them despite that. It's about keeping their shareholders happy. And I won't go into, you know, the
Cool. So
oil hat things above that, but I don't see that the solutions, even, you see, we can argue about who's right about our suspicions. You're sure about it because you know how to look at studies. I have intuition. I look at what I see in the real world. That's irrelevant, really. It's
cool,
the
cool.
actual
So
what they're trying to do to stop this this pandemic, if you like, with the vax. I don't think it's right. I most of my friends now who have been double, triple jabbed, they've had enough of it. When will it ever end? You know?
cool. So you don't trust studies, science, unless they agree with what you already believe.
It's
Is
not,
that
no.
correct?
It's not about belief, really. It's not about belief. It's not that. It's
Well,
like,
you believe that your carnivore diet works for you, and you see a study that you think validates that, and so you trust it.
but I don't need that study. I mean, I know it is because I know what our
But you
ancestral
trust it.
diet.
But you
I know
trust it.
what, yes, because it reflects who we are as human beings. It's like having a study to say whether polar bears should eat seals.
So it's
No,
nothing to do with the actual data.
yes, because my data, for me, you see, we have a difference on what is data. I say the plural of anecdotes is data. And I have seen tens of thousands of people
So
heal.
what do you think that clinical trials and community studies are? Do you think that those are separate from a collective experience of multiple people?
No, I don't, but they are financed by people who tend to not take certain things into consideration. Like, for example, just to go back to the diet thing quickly, the studies that have shown that meat causes cancer and saturated fat causes heart disease are done on people who eat McDonald's and stuff, and pizza and Coca-Cola and all that stuff with it. They've never been done previously on carnivores. And that's now showing something totally different. And I believe there's a lot of things they're not taking into consideration when they do these studies. Now, say they do these studies. I'm seeing studies that on the efficacy of vaccines where they're not doing any truly, what I would say, truly randomized controlled trial with a control group, because after a certain time, they take away the blind aspect of the study. They offer them the vaccine, that kind of thing. So they're basically destroying the control group.
Okay. So that's
I know you
something
love
that's
talking
been
about studies, so I'm trying to do it. And you're going to wipe the floor with me, Dan. I know you are, because you're much more
no,
expert
no, no.
on studies.
So you're telling me your understanding of the data, why you're telling me what problems you have with vaccine controlled trials. And that's something that has been kind of repeated in conspiracy circles, what you just said about taking away the control group, so to speak. And that is just completely wrong. They have a control group for the entire clinical trial. Once the clinical trial is complete, then the control group is offered the vaccine. Moving forward from there, there's still a control group. There's still unvaccinated people. So from moving on from the clinical trial, there is vaccine safety monitoring. That's done through things like vSafe in the US. the control group are unvaccinated people or just a background of health in the population. So that's how the study is continued, so to speak, in this monitoring phase. The control group doesn't go away. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, in theory, but they're not following them after the study is finished, so they don't know, and they can't track the difference between the autoimmune conditions coming up. And when they do, and when people talk about them, the many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that have talked about this, they get censored and they get shut up. Now, Dan, can I ask you a question?
Hold on. You're saying that they don't follow them. They do. These people are followed.
As far as I can see, you can say that they're followed, but they are they're shut up.
It's been people. Who's shut up?
Everybody at the moment, Dan. Everybody, all the great docs.
We're talking about
that's not scientific.
We're talking about following subjects in these clinical trials. You're saying that they're not followed, but I can tell you they are, and I can show you the results of that follow-up. So what would you say to that?
I would say that there are so many people who are saying that they're not being followed up and they're being silenced.
So why do you trust the people who are saying that?
Because they have nothing to gain. Nothing to gain, everything to lose. That's why I trust them.
Phil, hang on. Why are you saying that you trust the people who just say that these clinical trial subjects are not being followed up on when there's data showing that they are? How do you know? Why do you believe them? Because they have nothing to gain? They have everything to gain. These people who are being canceled, silenced, as you say, they're gaining a lot of clout, a lot of attention. Their products that they are selling are getting more attention. It's
Dan, a few of them.
Why not? Why ignore the data?
A few of them. Why ignore the data? And so what? So they should. Good luck to them. But most of them do not sell any products, and they're risking their careers. They get thrown out of their careers. They get disgraced. They get
everybody that I've covered is selling their own stuff. Everybody that
okay, that's why you pick them. Now pick some who aren't, because I know tens of thousands who aren't.
I don't know any who aren't having their own motivations behind what they're saying. So, but either way, we can talk about
motivations. Their own motivations are very, very pure. They're very honest. They don't stand to make these billions. When in history, can I ask you, when in history have the people who have burned books, silenced people, disgraced them, ridiculed them? When have those people ever been the good guys? You know, this is, and I know you don't want to hear it, and people don't, because
plenty of times.
It's Nazi stuff. It's Nazi stuff, man.
Oh, please, Phil.
These people need to be.
I'll recommend something to you. This is a book, Pox, An American History, Smallpox History.
Oh yes. Okay.
During the time of smallpox vaccination, when people were refusing smallpox vaccines and there were outbreaks in the 50s in the US, people would literally get vaccinated, forcibly vaccinated at gunpoint from forces that were teams of police forces and doctors. That happened, and we didn't go into a Nazi state because of that. It was a public health campaign, a forceful and, something that probably wouldn't be acceptable today campaign, but it was much more extreme back then, and it was still about public health. Do not compare COVID vaccination and public health to Nazism. That is kind of gross, and I think that you know that.
No, I don't. Have you heard the many Holocaust survivors who've been warning about this? It creeps in by little steps, Dan.
There are plenty of Holocaust survivors who are saying that that's complete crap too.
Yeah, of course, because there's mass formation now, isn't there? There's mass formation psychosis.
You're parroting Malone there, I see. So how do you know you're not in the mass psychosis? Again, look at the data. Why do you ignore the data?
Because my solutions, they're not my solutions, but our ancestral solutions to problems like this cause no harm. First, do no harm. You know, there's nothing that I recommend that does any harm to anybody whatsoever. And you've made up some strange things about me, like I give out medical advice and whatever. I mean, I have great doctors who I send them to. The only medical advice that could ever be construed is that I say, yes, you probably will be able to get off all your meds, and most people do. But if they're on meds that I don't understand how they should taper off, I have some great docs, and I lose a lot of money by sending my clients to them so that they can work with them to come off their meds safely, because I am not qualified to say that.
So
That's
you make
from
so
a
you make
few.
them so you make them promises and they pay you for a consulting hour on your website and you give out
I don't
advice.
make them any promises, except that
You just
many people,
you just said that you
many
promised them that they'll get off their meds.
no, I said that they probably can get off their meds. I can't promise
And
them.
what do you think that sounds like to somebody who is coming to you for help? Are they going to say, "Oh, well, I don't know if he's right, but I'll try it," or are they saying full force that they're trusting you, that they believe you?
There are some meds, Dan, that are very dangerous, that serve no purpose, that have no dangers of stopping immediately, and some have.
You didn't answer my question there.
Some have dangers in weaning off, and I tell them of those dangers. And if I'm not feeling that I am knowledgeable enough in that particular area of that med, I send them to particular doctors who do have that experience. But they also know what I know, which most doctors don't. And even setting aside the COVID thing for a moment, the doctors who find out what I find out generally give up their careers and then struggle for a lot of time, with not very much money, because they're truly helping their patients. Because,
yeah, I mean, I've heard this exact same spiel before, and it's from people who recommend all sorts of health solutions that
I know, I understand,
that are objectively wrong. I mean,
I've told you, I'm with you. I'm with you on it.
People who recommend that their parents give their children bleach say the same things that you're saying.
Well,
and they say that the science is on their side, and they say their experience tells them vindicates them.
It doesn't make me wrong. My thing is all about subtraction. I don't tell people to take
how do you, my question is, how do you separate yourself from those people? You're both relying on intuition, you're both relying on experience, you're both relying on this idea that the medical establishment is completely wrong and you're right. So how do you figure out how do you figure out who's right? How do you go about it?
The medical establishment is not completely wrong.
How do you figure
out?
It has
some very good aspects. This is not black and white. There's a lot of gray areas.
How do you figure it out? How do you go about it?
Because I've never done anyone any harm, and they've had tremendous results. And there are many times. Can I finish answering your question? And
sure.
in many times in the past, I have been taken down those routes of, this might be good, this thing that you take, this herbal medicine, that. I would have to say that 99% of the people, the alternative medical stuff out there is rubbish. It's absolute rubbish, and I hold it in the same contempt as you do. Because they don't understand anthropology and exactly what the human digestive system is, and the root of autoimmune and metabolic disorders. And that I do understand.
You do? Okay. So,
yes.
All right. So do you think that you're not doing harm by telling people to not take the vaccine?
I'm asking people to question, and I'm saying it should be a personal choice.
You've made several comments publicly about how people should not take the vaccine explicitly.
Because I'm seeing tremendous damage from it, Dan, and I am seeing that, and I am.
So you are telling people to not take the vaccine. Do you think you're not doing harm?
No, I don't think I am doing harm, because I think there are far better ways around it. If I was just some nutter in my bedroom who had no experience of this and no contact with people on the front line, then I think it would be a bit questionable to give my opinion. But I have so many friends who've been damaged by this, Dan.
So I'm going to just show you this graph. People who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And this is hospitalization rate in the US. Green line is relatively flat, and the blue line, the unvaccinated people, is pretty high. These are people being hospitalized, suffering from COVID. Do you think that it's doing harm to tell people to not be part of this group or not?
Yes, because you can't see what they've been also hospitalized for, which is like in the 2 weeks after the jab, when they're
these are hospitalized for COVID.
Yes,
there's plenty of information about the
and most of them are hospitalized, Dan. Most of them are hospitalized with COVID, not from COVID.
No, they're
Most of
hospitalized
them.
because of COVID.
That is
That's how
again,
this data are gathered.
well, that's what the stats say that you're looking at, but it doesn't tally with what I hear from the people on
So
the
you're
front
just denying the data again.
Yes, I am denying that. I'm not denying that data. I'm questioning it, Dan. I'm not denying it totally. But I am saying, if you're not letting me put, and it's only a very short point I want to make, that a lot of these people are counted in the first 2 weeks after the jab. They're counted as unvaccinated, and then some are even counted towards the data when they've not had the booster and stuff like that. So a lot of the unvaccinated, yeah, and well, you say it's not true. I say it is true, but from what I hear, we won't move past that point.
No. We can talk about it. We can talk about it. So in the first 2 weeks after your first dose, that person is unvaccinated. Do you know why?
Well, I've heard why, because, you know, it hasn't kicked into its full effect to a layman like me.
Exactly. So
why do you reject that? You get the most of the severe side effects. So
the hospitalization rate for side effects of COVID vaccines is extremely low. These numbers that I just showed you, that doesn't account for that. It doesn't account for people getting hospitalized with side effects of the vaccine. They have to be hospitalized with COVID because of COVID. So these are people who test positive. Okay, these are not people getting hospitalized from side effects of vaccines. That doesn't explain the data.
And you have total faith in all the tests, do you? Even though that they have been shown many times to be pretty inaccurate and not be able to tell between COVID and the flu and that kind of thing.
You don't think that PCR tests can differentiate between SARS-CoV-2 and influenza?
Well, this is what I've been told by the CDC.
You've been told, but have you looked? You've been told, but have you looked?
Well, I have been sent studies on it that have shown that they are now changing over to another system because the old one was unreliable.
Okay, so explain that whole story there, as you understand it.
As I understand it, they can't differentiate between flu and COVID, and I think there has been an enormous confusion between flu and COVID across the board.
Incorrect. So you're talking about, what you are talking about is just something that has been parroted in conspiracy circles with no understanding of what actually happened.
And the conspiracy thing is so insulting. These are very, very intelligent, questioning people.
Phil, hang on. I'm telling you, you are repeating word for word the stories that I see shared in conspiracy circles. I'm just telling you that.
Word for word.
Do what you will with that information. But this is how that story actually plays out. Okay. SARS-CoV-2 is one virus. There is a specific PCR test looking for specific nucleic acids in that virus. It doesn't detect common cold coronaviruses. It doesn't detect influenza viruses. It only detects SARS-CoV-2. There is a separate PCR that only detects influenza. Doesn't detect SARS-CoV-2, doesn't detect common cold coronaviruses. During the summer, I think it was earlier this year or earlier in 2021, there was an EUA in submission for a SARS-CoV-2 PCR, one version of it that the CDC was waiting to hear back on. They withdrew that and submitted a different one that is a multiplex. Do you know what a multiplex is? Because that was a word in that story. And I assume you didn't, I looked at the story, right?
Enlighten me as to what a multiplex one is, please. Yeah.
So you didn't look at the story. So a multiplex is a PCR that you can test all in one tube for both SARS-CoV-2 and influenza. Two different tests, right? Two probes, two sets of primers, both in the same tube. One color gives you one virus, the other color gives you the other virus. Multiplex in the same tube, two viruses. That's what happened. So they said, okay, we're gonna withdraw our submission for just the one and submit just the two, so that this flu season, we can detect both at the same time. We can save time and resources by testing for both at the same time and not separately. That's the reason. The tests are very specific.
This is what you've been told. This is what you're telling me. And
no, this is how these tests work. I do these tests. I've done plenty of PCR. I've designed my own PCR tests. I know how they work.
Fine, but my partner who comes home with these tests, she's a nurse, I've never seen a test for both of anything. So, you know, I would, you see, again, I would have to think laterally on this, because now there's something extraordinary that I saw recently. Now you can debunk this, maybe it's a hoax, maybe it isn't, but I saw something interesting that was supposed to have come out of the CDC, where there is a test, and this was something I certainly wasn't going to mention, but they say that the effects of 5G can create coronaviruses in the cells. Have you come across this one?
Yeah, I've heard that, and
yeah,
that's ridiculous.
well, I would say by the standard method of our understanding of it, absolutely, it's ridiculous.
What do you understand 5G to be?
It is disruptive to cells, without a doubt.
What do you understand 5G to be?
I don't. I'm not a scientist. I don't.
So why are you just believing these things?
Because I look at the scientists who explain it, and I just take away.
Do you look at the scientists who explain the actual scientists, or the scientists who make the claims?
I listen to them mostly. I like to listen to them because I like to look in their eyes. I like to see their hearts. I like to see where they're coming from. And I'm not convinced one way or the other about 5G, because honestly, I don't know. Why
are you talking about it?
Because if that study is true, it's a very interesting one, because it might even show that there might be some mileage to the exosome issue. And also, how are things transmitted? For example, there was one time in the Arctic, I believe it was, or the Antarctic, where a group of a load of people, 60 or so, they went there, they were all totally healthy, and after a couple of months, they developed respiratory issues. How did that get there? How did it get to them? Does that not point maybe that it might be worth having a look a little bit more at the terrain theory and not discounting it completely? I'm not saying that. I don't say, listen, the terrain theory is right and the virus theory is wrong, you know, the germ theory is wrong. I don't say that. I say, I think we should look at all of this, because in history, and not silence people who are obviously extremely intelligent, who have completely differing views. When they're silenced, then alarm bells goes off with me, because we should be looking at that. I mean, look at Galileo, look at the persecution he got. Look, he went
Galileo fallacy.
Sorry?
Galileo fallacy.
Galileo fallacy. You know, there are many times where people have been right and they've been vilified in their lifetimes.
And there have been infinitely more situations where people have been wrong and never vindicated.
Absolutely, yes. But you see, my thing is, you seem to think that I'm arguing against you on every point. I'm not. I'm just saying I believe that you are incredibly knowledgeable and very, very well educated, way beyond me, in that business of microbiology. Now, how much of microbiology is right? I don't know, because a lot of it doesn't tally with the present, my experience. And the people who are pushing these solutions are the people who stand to make trillions, and there's been the biggest transfer of wealth and financial reset in history during this time. Do I think that's fair? Do I trust them? No, I don't completely, because there are alternative measures that don't disrupt anyone's lives, and the collateral damage is zero from it. And I believe sincerely, even if all of the theories are right about COVID, I believe sincerely that it would cause a hell of a lot less disruption. It would help people to be healthy in all other aspects, and it would give them back their sovereignty too, without being totally dependent on pharmaceutical drugs. Which, honestly, Dan, I mean, some of these companies, I believe they paid out something like 3 billion in damages in a time when they've made sort of 35 billion. And so, you know, people are not hearing that they are actually paying out in damages. And so it's not, I can't trust these people. I can't trust them, Dan, but I have an alternative.
So you're just, so this spiel is just kind of, the problem with it is, Phil, you have a platform, you have your own audience, and you say these things to your audience. And I think you're taking kind of a Joe Rogan lazy approach, where it's like, I don't know the truth, I don't know what's right, but here, listen to this. That's not responsible. You're not doing the due diligence to kind of work through what is actually true or not, and then communicate it to your audience. You're telling your audience these things, they're going out there believing it.
No, because that's what you're doing. Because you're telling them there is.
You're not doing that.
There is something definite to believe. All I tell my audience is that there are absolute miracles that happen by eating like our ancestors did. And having,
you're telling them that there's miracles so you're telling them that if they adopt your diet, then they experience miracles.
They're not miracles. They're just
You just called them miracles, but okay.
It's normality. I mean, people call them miracles because medicine has taught us that these issues that are totally reversible are not reversible, because they want us to think that, and they maybe some of them believe it. I mean, I know a lot of docs and who have come out and they start expressing the same things as I do, and they say they're doing it to apologize to the harm that they did to their patients previously with their med school training and filling them full of pharmaceuticals. You know, Dan, nobody gets ill due to a deficiency in pharmaceuticals. They don't, man. You know that.
They absolutely do. There are plenty of people who depend on pharmaceuticals to live.
No, not really. Type
1 diabetics.
They depend on pharmaceuticals to get.
What about type 1 diabetics, Phil?
You have to, once the beta cells have gone, you have to take insulin. But
there you go.
But look at the clinical results of my friends, Doctors Csaba Tott and Dr. Zofia Clements at Paleomedicina in Hungary, who are reversing type 1 diabetes as long as it's caught very early. And they're reversing it and they're completely off insulin. And you only get about 1 or 2 stabs at it. You have to be very careful with that. And if somebody is type 1 diabetic, and I have had some clients who are, and I would never, ever tell them to stop taking insulin, but I do tell them to really work closely with their doctor, because they can get in real trouble taking too much insulin, because once they're on a ketogenic diet, they have to bring down their insulin. They don't need to take anywhere near so much. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And it can be a lifesaver. But if it was caught early and if it was understood in the same way as they understand it at Paleomedicina, then they could be stopping that in childhood.
Type 1 diabetes is a genetic thing. Yes, it is. That's the difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1 you're born with. It's a genetic problem.
Look at their case studies.
If you think you can cure type 1 diabetes, then cool, publish it. Otherwise, you know,
it is published.
Please don't tell people that they can reverse type 1 diabetes.
No, Dan, you see, you're making that up, trying to make me into a baddie, saying I'm telling people that they can reverse their type 1 diabetes. When they come to me and they've been type 1 diabetic for a decade or two, I tell them they can't, but I tell them they will be able to use their daily dose of insulin, because I've seen that many times.
So will you keep telling your audience things about the COVID tests being inaccurate after what I've explained to you?
Yes, because I won't tell them what to think. I will tell them to go and question, to go and listen.
Why would you tell them to question something that's already figured out?
Because their science is never settled, Dan. That's so.
We know how PCR works. We know if you, this is another fallacy of like misunderstanding science. You always have too high of expectations on science. Just because philosophically science never proves something, that doesn't mean you get to go out and say that anything at all is possible. Okay, you have to ask for the data to overturn what the data already show. Okay, you do studies, you gain understanding, you come up with a model, an answer of how things work. That model, that answer can only be overturned by further evidence. Okay.
But that's exactly what I've done with the health stuff. I've just found.
But I'm talking about the COVID. I'm talking about COVID tests. I'm talking about COVID tests. Will you continue to tell your audience to question it, even though there is no data to suggest that they are inaccurate?
Dan, I can't think of a time that I've really got into COVID testing. It's not really part. The time when I talk about it mostly is to do with you.
So just recently you left a comment on Facebook questioning whether or not people can tell the difference between Delta and Omicron variants of SARS-CoV-2.
Questioning it, yes, because when I've heard people, there are many recordings of people.
So again,
you're saying, can I have a test for the Delta? And they go, there isn't one. So there might be, Dan, that you know of, but they're not being distributed everywhere. So how does everybody know there's this Omicron going on?
These tests aren't distributed.
To my local doctor.
These tests for Delta and Omicron aren't distributed. Do you understand how it works? Do you understand how people figure out whether or not someone's infected with Delta or Omicron?
No, not really, because I'm hearing that there aren't any tests.
So Phil,
you can easily convince me on that, which is great, but they're still just colds.
So Phil, why are you doing this? Why are you going out in public and making these public statements to your audience on people's Facebooks, saying things that you don't really understand? You're just repeating what you hear without checking it.
But so are you, Dan.
Why?
So are you.
Why? No, I'm
Because
not. I check
I
everything.
hear it from
I
people.
understand what I talk about. I say when I don't know something. I'm not going on Facebook talking about diet because I'm not concerned about talking about something I'm not really well an expert in. I
But
don't
if
have
you
I don't
were,
I don't have any interest in
but
doing
Dan,
that.
if you
But you
were an
are you
expert
have
in
no
it,
problem talking about things that you have no idea of.
but
Why is that?
if you were an expert in it, you would be an expert in health and realize that all of these solutions that you're telling people to take all these vaccines are
So
totally
you're avoiding my question. You're
No,
avoiding my
I'm
question.
saying that they're very
Why
similar.
are you talking? You're talking about COVID tests online, something that you don't understand with a lot of confidence. There's a lot of confidence in your comments that you leave on people's pages.
I have been told that there is no test around here that distinguishes Delta from Omicron from the original.
It's called sequencing. A positive COVID PCR test is sequenced, and they're able to determine whether or not it's Delta or Omicron. That's how it works.
Why do none of our doctors know that then?
Your doctors, I don't know, maybe your doctors aren't up on information. Maybe they are clueless themselves.
Yeah,
That's
very possibly.
very common knowledge
Very
that it's
possibly.
sequencing that does this.
Very possibly. In which case, how do they
Not
know
possibly,
that,
definitely. It's how it's
yeah,
done.
yeah. Great. So how do they know Omicron is spreading if the doctors don't know how to test for it? Even if there is a test, you might well be right.
Doctors will order a COVID test. That test is outsourced to a clinical diagnostics lab. That clinical diagnostics lab might have facilities, capabilities of sequencing their positive tests. If they do so, then they do that. If they aren't able to do it, then they will send those samples that are positive to another lab that can. It's those clinical testing laboratories that do that and report the results to public health.
Yes, and I've seen some horrible conditions in there where things are getting swapped around and the conditions are awful. And you know,
So
the basic narrative.
you're just kind of repeat. I've seen what you're talking about. It's stuff that's shared on conspiracy forums, and I can tell you that I can tell you that testing facilities are very good.
Why do you
They have internal
conspiracy forums?
controls. They have internal controls in every test that make it really easy to spot contamination, make it really easy to determine what's actually positive, what's not positive, and what's indeterminate.
But Dan, there are so many things that started off as conspiracy theories: vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, perpetual lockdowns.
I'm not trying to rail on you.
How many have to come true before we realize that these people should be talked to? You see, I have learned about PCR testing today. What you say, right?
So are you going to continue saying what you've said? Will you change your mind?
It's completely the wrong way around, and people are making absolute millions and billions off these PCR tests that are making people enormously paranoid and wasting people's time. When if you got to the root of what is causing people to get this sick in the first place, we wouldn't need any of this stuff, Dan. I'm going beyond this now because it's just nonsensical. Everybody's shoving things up their nose all day long. I'm not one who's saying that there's microfibers getting into the brain off these PCR tests. I'm not.
You're spreading that idea.
No, I'm not.
That idea. You just did.
I saw it and I thought that's interesting, but I don't know about that, you know, because it's just too far out there.
That's a lazy approach. It's a lazy approach to see something and then repeat it without actually.
No, it's a lazy approach to be giving away our sovereignty to somebody who thinks we have to put a swab up our nose to tell us whether we're sick or not. I mean, how bad is a pandemic where we have to test to see if we're ill? You know, I mean, really, I think that we need
that's epidemiology 101. You test to know where the virus is.
We haven't bothered to do it in the past, Dan, when we've had these things. We no people
not to this scale, because this is the biggest pandemic we've had in modern times, but we have absolutely done this in the past.
I would question that it's I don't see that I do dispute that there is some massive pandemic, and what there is of a pandemic.
So you're still disputing the excess deaths figures I showed you.
You've admitted that you are not an expert in diet and lifestyle and whatever. I am, and I do see these things happen, do see these results. And I know with that knowledge that all of that other stuff is just extraneous nonsense that we don't need. And we need to give people back their sovereignty and tell them how to actually stay well. And that isn't being done on any of the media. There's just constant fear mongering, test, 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 this, that. And there has been a case-demic. So many people have been so symptom free or tiny little symptoms that they'd never have noticed in any other year. And
So
why are we obsessed with it, you know?
Pre-vaccine, cases always tracked with death. Cases went up, deaths went up. Hundreds of thousands of people in several countries all around the world dying in excess of what's normal. And that's not a pandemic to you.
But why don't we see what the people with the comorbidities, why don't we focus on how to get rid of the comorbidities?
Do you know what a comorbidity is?
Yes, of course I do.
What is it?
It's a comorbidity. It's a morbid issue that happens in conjunction with another one.
So what are some examples of it?
All the metabolic disorders, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, cancer.
What about respiratory failure?
Well, there is respiratory failure as well. And my mother died from respiratory failure 2 years ago, and it was just something that happened after the flu. And this year it would have been counted as coronavirus, and she would have been waving through a hospital window.
No, it wouldn't. No.
Yes, it would, Dan.
You're saying that every death is counted as a COVID death? No. So a comorbidity can be respiratory. Respiratory failure can be a comorbidity. That is one of the most common comorbidities reported on COVID death certificates. Respiratory failure, pneumonia, which follows viral infection, those things are caused by COVID. Okay, I want to make it clear that when you bring up comorbidities, you're also talking about things that the virus causes, that the illness causes.
Yes, which is what causes so much confusion. And in some instances, that might have been the case. But I tell you something that I do believe that you would dispute, and I really do believe that this has been, as a good friend of mine calls it, the virus that keeps giving, because it's uncovered many interventions for any issue. Like I had a horrific issue only a few days ago. I was absolutely totally floored, and I don't usually get sick, and I had and I've still got it. I've still got a chest issue. I would never think of getting tested, never think of anything. I took quercetin and zinc, and I took some D, and I took some Z, some C, and it passed very quickly. And I found that if I do get a respiratory issue, these things that are told to be ineffective, if I do get some kind of a respiratory issue, it just knocks it on the head very quickly. And yes, there are countries, Dan, that have implemented this with tremendous success. And yes, there are
implemented what
from their hearts.
Implemented what? Which countries?
The ivermectin, the hydroxychloroquine, and I know you've debunked them.
Neither of those work against COVID.
You can go on about the PCR tests all you like, and I will learn from you, right? I have learned stuff today.
I hope you do, and I hope to not see you talking about COVID testing again in public in the way you have.
Is there anything I've ever said? All you've done is called me a liar and trashed everything I've said on emails. And I have had 60 years of experience on this planet, 40 years of which I've been studying natural health, most of which has been rubbish. And I've thrown it out just as you would. But I have come across some absolute utter nuggets now. And I have a lot to teach you, as you have a lot to teach me. But you seem to be very disrespectful of anybody on another path. And I'm not. I'm here chatting to you. You're the one looking aside and dropping your eyes, man. I'm looking right in your eyes the whole time.
Phil, I'm trying to get you to have some honest reflection here of how you go about figuring out things that you communicate out to your platform. And at every turn, you're saying, well, I don't trust that. Well, I question that, even though you don't really understand it. And I still can't get you to, tell me that you're acknowledging that all the things that you've heard about PCR are wrong, and that you're not going to then spread those ideas to your audience anymore.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that everything I've heard about PCR is wrong. I've taken your viewpoint on board, and I will go in and look more at how they distinguish Delta from Omicron, which interests me. You've brought up something new for me there. Wonderful.
Yeah, but another thing is, Phil, I told you.
The basis of it, Dan, It's a waste of time. It's making people paranoid. It's ruining children's lives. It's destroying their psychology at school. They're being so stressed out. There's old people waving through windows. They don't need to be. There's devastation out there, Dan. And
what do you think is more? What do you think is more traumatic?
Finish this point. I will be quiet and let you talk. But the stuff, if you're wrong, the stuff you're putting out there has horrific collateral damage. The stuff I'm putting out there might make people think, oh, well, maybe the test's not so great, but I do know how to eat now and the lifestyle, which has made me incredibly healthy. And we do see cancer reversals, and we do see autoimmune reversals, and we do see metabolic disease reversals all the time. Not
cool.
so often.
Cool. Go ahead and publish that and prove it to the world so that everybody can benefit from your knowledge. But Phil, so
yeah,
with the testing, you asked me over email how Delta and Omicron are distinguished. I told you, and it was after that you left that comment on Facebook.
Have we communicated since Omicron was invented?
Invented?
I don't think we have we?
Invented.
I'm teasing you with that one, Dan. But yeah,
are you serious about that though?
No. I don't know.
Good. Okay.
I don't know, but whatever it is, it's weak, right? And it doesn't seem to be doing much. But I mean, there was a lovely saying that somebody came up with that Alec Baldwin's killed more people than Omicron. But I don't know. I mean, it seems to be tailing off to me, but the Gestapo tactics seem to be ramping up. It doesn't tally with what's actually going on. And I'm saying that my solutions cause no harm, none.
Oh, but they do. So, but we're not going to get into that. So
how do I?
So
no, my solution, not my ideas about PCR testing. Tell me how what I tell to my clients, nothing to do with COVID, but about general health. Tell me how on earth I cause any harm. I have never, and I've been that sick, Dan. No way would I ever risk other people being as sick as I am. It's very, very important to know that somebody who's been as sick as me would never, ever, ever put anybody at that kind of risk. Okay.
But you advise against vaccination, and that puts people at risk of getting sick from COVID and getting hospitalized.
There are far better ways around it. And I am saying, I mean, let's bring this up, this elephant in the room now. You sent me something when I mentioned about the footballers, and you sent me something saying it's always been a thing, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it has. I have heard about it in the past, but it's been very rare, right? You might get 3 a year, something like that. But now there's at last count I saw 182 that have died on the pitch. There's hundreds of other athletes and whatever who have had their careers ruined with something going on in their hearts. What's going on there, Dan?
Normal. It's been increasing. It's been increasing in recent years.
No, it hasn't.
Because people are getting better at diagnosing underlying heart conditions.
Whoa, but it doesn't take much diagnosis to see someone collapsing on a pitch.
Do you have any data that those numbers are increasing?
Yes, I've seen these numbers.
Where's the data?
Oh,
have you seen headlines, or have you looked at the data? Have you looked at the trends?
I've looked at trends, and I've looked at...
Where are the trends? Can you show me?
I don't know, Dan. I don't collect them like you do, right? I don't.
Find them. We're here. Find them. Show me.
I don't know.
Show me the trend.
You can say that, but it's happening. I mean,
show me the trend.
Commentators, footballers.
Show me the trend.
Out. Commentators, footballers are speaking out.
Show me the trend.
They're saying what is happening.
Show me the trend. Phil, you have to do the work. If you're going to make these serious claims, you have to do the work to show that it's really true.
In front of your face, it's happening. And in other years, it hasn't happened.
It's not in front of my face. I see claims. I see a headline from a tabloid. I don't see any trend. I don't see any data.
Have you seen the videos of them all collapsing? Have you seen them being stretchered off the pitch?
Yeah, that's normal. That's happened before.
Down.
Seeing one video, Phil, seeing one video of people being carried off the field because of something that has happened for years. That doesn't tell me that anything's different.
I remember in the last 20 years, there was one who got stretchered off and it was on video, and it was like, whoa, everyone remembers it. But this year, there are so many.
So show me the numbers, Phil. You can make the claims, but show me the numbers.
It has to be in the form of a study. Why can it not be in the form of football?
Because that's doing the work, Phil. You're making a really important claim here. You're making a claim that the vaccine is causing these things.
No, I'm not. I'm saying
yes, you are.
It seems suspicious to me. It seems like the most likely explanation. But if you have another,
so it's the most likely explanation. That's your claim. So test it.
Your explanation is to deny it's happening.
Test your claim. Why do you not want to do that? Why do you think it's okay to just
No, it's not
go and say it without testing it?
tangle that you always get me into, Dan, and everybody, where it has to be in a study.
It's not a tangle, Phil. It's an honest question.
I'm telling you that I'm not so interested in studies when most of them in my field of expertise have been proved to be absolute and utter bullshit, total bullshit, not partial.
You just don't trust studies that don't agree with what you already believe. You've kind of gone over that already.
No, that's you. I'm not really.
No, that's what you explained. You explained how that works for you.
I'm not concerned about studies in the first place. There are a lot of people in my field who are concerned about studies and bring them to my attention when it shows what we are all seeing and all have done for years. Right?
Okay, so you can't show me the trend.
Oh, that's interesting, you know, and then I don't really think about it. And then people say, oh, where was that study on carnivory? Oh God, I don't know. I don't even collect the ones that agree with me, you know, I don't.
Okay, so you don't have the trends to support your claim and you don't want to do the work to verify your claim.
But you're saying that, but I have seen evidence. It doesn't have to be in the form of a study.
So you've seen evidence in the form of something that your preconceived bias picked up on. And did you do the work?
Bias about people falling over on football pitches. It's horrific.
Sure you have. You hear that it's happening and then you see it. That's called confirmation bias. Test that. Do the work. Be honest. You know?
Well, I've looked at as many things as I can look at where I can find information about this, and all I'm finding is many single case studies where you can actually go to them and you can find details on them. They're not put together in one study at the moment.
So show me.
How can I show you like 300 things that I've seen?
Just one is fine. Case studies. You said that you saw case studies. Show me.
You can find many of these cases of people who have collapsed on football fields.
Okay, you can show me when you want to, but just back to the email that I mentioned. Yeah, so let's see. On December 12th, you sent me a series of questions. One of which was, quote, many videos are out there showing people asking medical staff if there is a reliable test for the Delta variant, and they always seem to reply that there is no test, and blah, blah, blah. You say that. And then I answer and I say, it's sequencing, Phil. They just sequence samples that test positive. And then I give you a link. And then after that was when you continued to comment publicly about there not being a test to distinguish between the two. So what I'm trying to get at here is, can I get you to honestly stop saying something publicly that is completely untrue?
I very much doubt it, because you think it's untrue. I
know it's untrue.
Okay, but when you hear of people getting tested for this, they don't get told they got Delta or Omicron or whatever, because the tests are not coming back and showing that. They just have some kind of a little positive thing that they read out, and then away they go, you know. And
Phil, it's a separate test. Do you understand that?
That's fine. If it's being sent away to a good lab, excellent, there is. But is the whole basis of it? You see, you to me, when you pick up on these points, and I can say that, Dan, you can win so many little battles with me, but you'll never win the war. You'll never win the overall viewpoint that all of this is bollocks, and there's far better ways around dealing with a pandemic that is as mild as this one is, and it is really.
So 5.5 million deaths is mild.
Compared to cancer and heart disease, yes.
5.5 million deaths from an infectious disease on the span of less than 2 years is mild.
Yes, because most of them had comorbidities, and not just respiratory comorbidities. So what we need to be looking at is the comorbidity.
So their lives don't matter because they were a little older.
Oh, no, not at all. Don't put words into my mouth.
I mean, that's kind of what you're saying, that it's mild because they were older.
No, I'm saying get them. No. I'm saying give them the stuff that does work as a treatment, and it does. I don't care what you say about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. There's too much evidence now.
It doesn't. What evidence is there that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin work?
So many doctors with proper hearts and nothing to gain speaking out. That's
Okay, so the words of doctors who do have monetary gain from it, what about evidence?
their clinical results of what they're getting. I
Like
believe
what?
them.
Like what? Where's it published?
Turning it round. Now, you see, it's always published with you. You think that's the end
Because
point.
that's what honest doctors and scientists do. Honest doctors and scientists do the work. They are honest about it, and then they convince their colleagues that their work is what is correct.
And there's a
If they don't care about convincing their
growing body
colleagues,
of
then
them.
there's probably a reason for
There's
that.
a growing body of them showing that this is happening from their clinical results, and they are publishing them.
Which clinical results?
Oh, Dan, look, I'll go and hunt them out if you really want, but I'm sure you've seen them anyway and ignored them because they are out there. There's many people doing it.
Have you?
So whatever. You know, there are people that I'm sure you've had a great go at debunking in the past, and very good. But there are ways to stop this, right? There are ways to stop that, to help those people who are in a terrible situation. And that's marvelous. I do not say that there's any death that is not something that you should take. Oh dear, here we go.
So I've shown you this before. I
Yeah,
mean, what do you say to this?
And Dan, if we took these people out of their comorbidities of metabolic and autoimmune and cancer diagnoses, that is what we should be really looking at.
Phil, I'm showing you data. This is a randomized controlled trial showing that ivermectin has no efficacy on people who are on preventing people from getting hospitalized by COVID. What do you say to this? How do you respond to it? Do you just reject it outright, or do you read it?
I could show you hundreds of studies that show that saturated animal fats cause heart disease and meat.
I'm not talking about saturated animal fats, Phil. I'm talking about ivermectin.
They're all crap, right? So I don't.
I'm not talking about saturated fats.
I don't trust the studies when
ivermectin.
Why do I not trust it? Because there are so many.
Because it doesn't believe with it doesn't agree with what you already believe.
There are so many people on the front line coming back and saying that it is having a tremendous effect. That's what I believe. People on the front line, not pieces of paper.
People on the front line are the ones who participate in treating patients. The people who wrote this study, who did this study, treat patients. They found it does not work. And you reject it outright because you don't trust them, because you think that it disagrees with what you already believe.
Yes, pretty much. Okay, I will admit to that. Yes, because I'm just hearing too much of it. You know, I go backwards and forwards. Of course I do. I don't just go, oh, I hate the medical industry, so ivermectin works. You know, I don't think anyone even needs ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, but I think it's a hell of a lot safer than the jabs and putting people on respirators, many of whom didn't need to go on respirators, and who, you know, between shifts, then the pressure was cranked up, the lungs got blown up. There are doctors who've admitted to this, and they were very, very good, very well-intentioned doctors who had a huge amount of panic at the start when they thought that this issue was worse than it is. And yes, there is something going on, without a doubt. I'm not, you've often called me a COVID denier. You know, I'm not at all.
Because you're denying that this is a serious pandemic.
I am denying the response to it, Dan.
You're denying that it's serious outright.
I'm denying that it should be serious, because if we taught people how to be well,
that's the same thing.
It would be completely okay. And if people
no, it wouldn't.
Jabs, then great. If people want to take ivermectin, great. There are too many reports from very, very, very honest doctors out there. This is why I don't like piece of paper. I like to look in people's eyes. I like to look in these doctors' eyes, and they.
Okay, I can find pictures of the people who
you can see their
study.
Heart, man. You can see their hearts, and you can see how honest they are.
So you can identify a liar just by looking at them? No,
by listening to them, by feeling what they're like.
So you can identify a liar by talking with them, essentially, is what you're saying.
No, I would. Nothing is 100%. I wouldn't say, but I have a great feeling for it.
You should be a lawyer then to figure out when criminals are lying.
No, I have, because of the many doctors who I do work with who come out and talk about natural ancestral healing, right?
The same doctors who don't know that that Omicron and Delta are differentiated by sequencing?
Dan, you've just interrupted me with one of your sort of things that you say constantly. You said, when I talk to these docs, and when I see their joy at finally being able to heal people, because they went into it to be healed, you know, to heal people, not to make money, which a lot of docs probably do. And they go into this, and then they come out, and the joy in them at discovering this, the absolute joy at seeing their patients really seriously reverse these conditions that we're told are not reversible. And they have the same vibe to me as the joy that's coming out of these docs who are treating their patients with ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, zinc. You see, these things are basically ionophores, right, that take the zinc into the cells. So when they do the studies on ivermectin, quite often they do it without, not ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. I understand that they've done it without the zinc. They've also done it at tremendously high doses, which are not recommended. You know, and there might be other studies that you know of that don't do that. You know, very good, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
When I look into the eyes of these docs, and I have so much experience of the docs in the natural ancestral healing arena, it's the same vibe. These people are doing it because they adore people and they want to really heal people. There is no monetary gain. These people give up their medical careers and they go down this path and they take huge cuts in salary. Okay, they're selling something, but it really works. And to be honest, you know, you've gone really pedantic with me trying to find something I sell. And honestly, Dan, I'm fucking broke at the moment, and I'm even facing being thrown out of my house, and I don't even know where we're going to live in 2 months. And if I did anything else,
sorry to hear that, but
there are things that I
do ask for money through your website. So.
Yes, I do. And I think that I completely and utterly deserve it. And if people can't afford it, they come to me, and I do give them consults for free. And I've done it many, many times. And there are many people who found huge healing, and I've never charged them a penny, because I can't turn people away, because I know what it's like to be that sick. If I see somebody on one of my Facebook groups with crippling arthritis, because I've been there, I've been on a sofa, I've been pissing in jars because I can't get up and walk to the toilet. And I know what it feels like. And I know that I can get them out of that pain. I know that, and I do it. And if they can't afford to pay me, I still do it, because I have to. I can't bear to see them in that kind of suffering. That is my speciality, right? Now, COVID is not my speciality, but I do know that if you are very, very robust at a mitochondrial level, you are not at risk from respiratory disorders in these sort of pandemics, because, as you know, most people get it mildly. That's not to say that everybody should just ignore it and whatever, but I believe the solutions are all wrong, and they are destroying society and destroying this planet.
So you think that vaccination keeping people out of the hospital is the wrong way?
I doubt the doctors who I talk to on the front line are saying that they are seeing enormous problems with the vaccinations.
Are these the same doctors who told you that there's no test to distinguish between Delta and Omicron?
No, I haven't actually talked to them about that, because I really don't give a shit about it, to be honest, really. Excuse me, swearing, don't mean to.
So these are not the same doctors that you're talking to that are saying these things?
No, the doctors who I'm hearing are from people who actually get tested. None of these doctors test themselves, and I certainly don't, and neither do any of my collaborators or family. So we don't really have any interest particularly in the test. But
so why do you talk about it publicly?
Why do you keep going on about this one tiny thing? I've told you I'll go look into it.
Because I'm concerned with people who spread misinformation, false ideas publicly.
And so am I.
It's caused a lot of damage so far. You are
spreading an enormous amount of misinformation too, and we believe that about each other. But I don't.
Yeah, you believe a lot of things.
I don't have any bitterness towards you, Dan. If you look through our emails, I'm just going, whoa, most of the time, and you're telling me some pretty horrific things. You know,
that's not true.
I'm a liar. My girlfriend's a liar. All the docs I talk to are liars. You know,
I never said your girlfriend was a liar, but you've gone on some pretty serious rants in your emails, but we're not going to get into that, Phil. We're going to keep talking as we are here. So,
but we believe each other is spreading misinformation, but we should all be listened to.
Yeah. So how do we figure out who's right? What do? Do we just go back and forth, throwing experiences at each other? That doesn't get us anywhere.
I'm right in that in that the mainstream media really should be telling people how to get well, and they don't. because the CDC and the WHO and whatever put out misinformation about what it takes to keep a human body healthy, serious misinformation. And that's why we're facing any sort of a pandemic in the first place. So I'm talking about getting to the root of it. I think all of this stuff, even if you're totally right about PCR tests and COVID and whatever, you've said that you're not an expert, right? I'm not an expert in that side. You're not an expert in my side. And we both admitted that. But I believe that my solution will do far more good and get to the root of the whole problem, instead of patching it up all the time with, how many boosters are you going to take, Dan? You know, I mean, when does it end? When does
3 doses. 3 doses is great.
And they're on about 4 now.
Who's on about 4? Israel? No. The data need to be on about 4 before we say that we need 4. Data showed that 2 are effective, and data are showing that 3 tops off your immunity, kind of rounds out the breadth of your immunity to variants. So 3 doses is good.
I also saw a study
4 doses not necessary. And you're going to say you saw a source about a 4th dose. I want evidence, Phil. What's a reason that we need a 4th dose? That's my standard. That's my standard. My standard is convince me with data and evidence that there's a good reason to get a 4th dose. That's my standard. Your standard is you just don't trust the whole thing.
No, I don't. No.
Yeah, you don't trust the whole thing because you don't like it.
It's not that I don't like it exactly. It's ridiculous. It changes all the time, and it's becoming hugely politicized. I mean, look at when Trump was in, right? And then there's Kamala Harris saying she wouldn't take a vaccine if Trump told her to, and Biden expressing concerns about the safety of it. And now they're in power, allegedly. There is this enormous push for everybody to get jabbed. You know,
Phil. So
Dan, where do I find out? Where do women like me get convinced that it is actually has something to do with health, or it's not just being politicized?
Once again, Phil.
800 pharmaceutical lobbyists. They have 3 lobbyists for every congressman. You know,
once again, Phil.
Going wrong there, man.
Once again, you're just repeating things that I see shared in conspiracy circles. Back when Trump was president and this whole Operation Warp Speed thing started, it was very clear that Trump wanted to get a vaccine into use so that he could take credit for, ending the pandemic. And whatever politics are going to say what they say, as a scientist, I only care about the data. Politicians were expressing concerns about Trump pushing through a vaccine that hadn't been adequately tested. Okay, that's a valid concern for anybody to have on either side of the political spectrum. At the beginning of this, is this thing going to be safe? Is it going to be effective? We see it, we have the data now. It's safe, it's very effective. Okay, I don't care what the politicians say. I don't care about your misinterpretation of what they say. I only care about what is true, what the data show.
So what's going on with the VAERS and the yellow card then? Explain to me that.
People don't understand how to use VAERS.
Even though 80% of the reports are made by doctors.
Let me tell you how VAERS works. VAERS is a passive reporting system. Okay, so anybody can submit anything to it. Doctors, lawyers, whatever. Lots of reports are submitted by lawyers who want to defend their client in court. Any adverse effect following a vaccine is reported to VAERS, whether or not it had anything to do with the vaccine. Okay, so when you have millions of people getting vaccinated, billions getting vaccinated all at once, there's going to be normal health effects in the background of that population, right? If I got sick, for example, a week before I got a vaccine, that's not going to get reported to VAERS. But if that same illness happened to happen a week after I got the vaccine, it will get reported. Okay, so you can't know from just VAERS what's happening. You have to do follow-up, and that's what things like vSafe in the US are for, where those events are investigated, verified, and then compared to a control group. Okay, this is how it was figured out that J&J vaccines and AstraZeneca vaccines were associated with rare forms of blood clotting. They figured that out when there were 6 cases out of 6 million doses for J&J. This monitoring system is very good. They follow it very closely. Lots of doctors who are very concerned about the health and safety of the public. I'm sure if you looked in their eyes or did your analysis, you'd probably see that in them. That's how it works. Okay, you cannot just take VAERS on its own and say, look at all of these events that the vaccines are causing. That's not how it works. It's hypothesis generating at best.
Yes, I would accept that. However, I don't know a single case that I know personally of people who have had a lot of issues after the vaccine. I don't know a single one, and neither does my partner, and neither does the docs that we speak to. We don't know.
I had no issues.
Hang on, we don't know a single one of those cases that's even been reported to the yellow card. So I would believe that probably they estimate, don't they, that only 1 to 10% ever actually gets reported there. Of the
So that stat comes from the fact
from what I see is that is pretty accurate, and we are seeing an awful lot of those events. Dan, if people, healthy people, there's musicians who've cancelled gigs because they've one guitarist recently, he had his 2nd jab and suddenly he's in hospital, sort of paralyzed down one side, and like it's just goes on and on. These are personal friends of mine, and I can't ignore it. I can't ignore it, Dan. Because, these are listed as side effects and they're happening, and I can't deny it. And my solutions to this, yes, there will be people who slip through the net. And there will be people who die from respiratory issues. I'm not going to save the world on that.
Hundreds of thousands, far more than will suffer from vaccine side effects.
I'm going to save the people who are pretty healthy, who are going in for these things and then getting terrible trouble. We have a network of midwives, right? And the reports back from there is pretty horrific recently. It's heartbreaking what's happening. There are so many stillbirths. There are so many issues with the kids being born with kind of weird genitals. There's issues with the mother.
Do you have trends? Do you have data to show that?
No, but you see, the thing is, when you hear this, you get fascinated and you look at it, but then all of these reports in theirs apparently are a waste of time. And yet, if somebody gets diagnosed with COVID and then they get hit by a bus, the old adage, and then it goes down and it did. They were going down as.
That's not how it works.
COVID, yeah. Well, it certainly wasn't.
Not how it works.
And it's easy to say it's not how it works, but it is. These were going down.
It's not, Phil. The way these things are handled.
So it's okay one way, but not the other way.
The other way, it doesn't happen. That's the problem. Okay. When doctors determine the cause of death and they're going to put it down as COVID, the cause of death has to be natural. Nobody who gets hit by a bus and tests positive for COVID is listed as a COVID death.
I don't think the docs did it, but it was listed for a while because they did take an awful lot of people off the total in England at one point last year. I seem to remember when they did realize there were some suspicious ones, but that's not proving that COVID is not a dangerous thing. I'm just saying.
Why are you still saying that?
When there's data, okay, whether it's on one side or the other, it needs to be looked at. And to me, I need to look at the VAERS stuff because I am seeing more people in my personal circle having trouble with the jabs than ever had trouble with COVID. That's what I'm saying, Dan. What do I do about that, right? Do I go, I'm sorry, mate, whatever's happened to you is nonsense because the data says so?
You know what you do? You do the honest work to figure out for yourself what's going on. You don't look at just VAERS, okay? VAERS is not a conclusion forming database. It's hypothesis generating, okay? You can't just look at VAERS. Do you understand that?
Yes, Dan. I do. And I don't just look at VAERS. I look at the people dropping around me.
It's always just headlines and your own experience with you, isn't it?
Not always, but
do you think that your own experience is representative of the world?
I couldn't say, but I do see an awful lot of people talking in that way. You know,
You couldn't say whether or not your experience is representative of the whole world.
I know I couldn't. No, I couldn't. Of course.
Really. So in your experience, you don't know anybody who's died, suffered of COVID. Is that representative of the whole world?
No, definitely not. No. But
There you
then again, I always ask them when they say that, I say, were they offered any sort of treatment? You know, were they offered early on? You know, were they offered?
You're asking if they've been offered drugs that don't work. Yeah.
Well, do you think they don't work? I think they do.
You think, but we know they don't.
No, you don't. You've just seen studies, and I've seen the data put forward by the people who are actually
data?
People on the front line. Oh, we've been through that.
What data? Yeah, you don't present data. What data? You just say that you know people who have treated it successfully.
I don't have the studies to hand. I'll go and find some data if you like of what these people have published.
You usually don't. Whenever I ask you, you don't. You never really follow up. So
no, I
that's
don't.
concerning.
Well, no, actually I do, but then you always throw them out, and I find.
No, I explain to you why they're wrong.
This thing about studies all the time, Dan. They're useful, right? But they're not the be all and end all, as can be shown in the diet field. They are all rubbish. And the studies that you sent me recently had Pfizer at the bottom of it, you know?
Which ones?
I don't remember.
The clinical trials done by Pfizer? Yeah.
But these are the people that are making the money off it. Would you really, really trust them? I mean, that has got to be the ultimate, conflict of interest, surely, Dan.
I look at the data. I don't trust the people. I trust the data.
But
their data have been vindicated, repeated, and verified by independent scientists all over the world.
And so have the studies that show that meat causes cancer. But they don't mention that everybody eats bread and Coca-Cola and chips fried in seed oil. They don't mention that because there are too many confounders. So what is those studies? Gosh. I don't know. You see, I know you can sort of do that. It's like, oh, this non-scientific tinfoil hatter. But Dan, I'm a human being. I look at these things and I care deeply about people, and I'm trying to find what I think is the best way out of this. And I think it can be done without
vaccination.
It can be done without destroying economies and creating a two-level society, a two-tier society of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. It's disgraceful. The mental illness that has been caused by people thinking that we should wear some face nappy, you know, it's absolutely crazy, Dan.
So it's interesting, you know, when I think our first
that would make that unnecessary.
Yeah. So I think the first ever email or interaction you sent to me was actually a list of studies that you thought showed that masks don't work, and then I responded to that, going through each study, telling you what was wrong with it, and then showing you good data, actual data that show that masks work. In many cases, you had misinterpreted the study. You had just copy and pasted a list that I had seen before. And so it seemed like you really trusted those studies to tell you that masks don't work.
No, I just tried.
But then you rejected any study that I showed you that showed very conclusively that masks do work to reduce transmission.
No, this is the basic point that you have failed to understand through all of our correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
I try to speak your language. And I don't speak it very well. I'm like a tourist trying to get by on phrase.
Phil, I'm talking about the first interaction we had.
Yeah, because I knew you were into studies. I'd had the courtesy to look at your channel. Whenever I said, oh, have you seen any of my stuff? No, I wouldn't possibly look. You're too stupid to write a book, that kind of thing you said. So, you know.
I didn't say that.
You did, Dan, you did. And,
no, I didn't.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll disagree on that one. You know, and when I put forward that, I think, well, okay, here's some studies, and let's see what Dan says about that, because he likes studies, right? I would also then like to speak about what I see with masks, right? Early on in this thing, there's people, you know, they're sneezing into them, they're touching them, they're pulling them up and down. Even if they work, people aren't using them, right? So it's nonsense. You can't even take the data. And then you've got
So,
the fact that they are causing tremendous psychological damage to people. They're damn. And then something comes out to me that is
what psychological damage has been measured?
that is blatant common sense, right?
What psychological damage has been measured?
There are child psychologists I've heard talking about it, right?
You've heard, okay.
Yes, I do. I listen to these experts and I see that they have a heart. But let me finish this point, right? There is something that makes an awful lot of sense to me, which is one virologist who was talking about masks. And you're talking about stopping the droplets, right? And yeah, I probably do. But then again, droplets fall at what, like 6 feet from the mouth or whatever, nose, unless you sneeze. But then there is the business of, well, a mask, it's very likely that it helps to aerosolize it because it breaks up those droplets. And then you're going to say no to that. But then also I've heard that but even so,
look, Phil, hang on, I'll stop you right there just for a second, okay?
Nonsense.
No, I'll stop you for a second right there. This idea that masks help aerosolize virus, not true. We've seen this happen with gaiters, neck gaiters, right? Neck gaiters do that. We can measure it. It's not measured with masks. So what do you, I can show you that experiment if you like.
That's great. But still, to me, I mean, you see what I mean? We get caught up on these minutiae. And you might be right.
This is what you brought up. This is what you brought up. You brought up a wrong point again.
And I'm just telling you what makes me question it. I'm not saying it happens or it doesn't.
You're telling me what makes you question it, but you never do the work to test it. You never do the work to find out. You just take it because it agrees with what you already believe.
My type of work is looking at the effect it's having on people. The effect that when my partner goes to work and they've all got these sores and whatever around their mouths and they hate them and they hate the feeling of it. And they're saying it's increasing their respiratory issues and their asthma. And it is just in your face. It's plain. This is a person here who is saying that. It's so like
you have, listen, Phil, you have someone saying that. You have someone saying that.
She's the only nurse who doesn't take the flu jab and she's the only one who never gets the flu. What's going on?
That's pretty irresponsible, but
it's not irresponsible.
It pretty much is. But Phil, you're saying that someone says that they wear a mask, they get sores, all whatever. And then I say, I've worn a mask while at work, while in public, throughout pretty much the entire pandemic. And I've had none of that. So we have someone saying one thing and someone saying another thing. Yes. Again, how do we figure out what's true? How do we figure out if these things are being caused by the mask? How do we figure out whether or not they're effective? How do you figure that out?
Why do you just,
Phil, why do you, Phil,
I say, if you want to wear a muzzle, you wear one and I'll be the one laughing at you because I think they're ridiculous.
Hang on. I'm not calling you a liar. I'm asking, how do you figure out what's true? If you have one experience saying one thing and one experience saying the other, how do you figure out what's causing what and what is true? Is it just, why do you just stop at believing the person who says the thing that you like?
I don't like it.
You like the fact that masks are useless. You believe that, so you go with it.
I think that if any benefits that they have is massively outweighed by the collateral damage.
And what's your measurement of that? Is it just what people say and what you see in headlines? Or do you take into account do you take into account a collective experience?
Yes. Well, I take into account what I see, what people tell me, the fact
what you see, what people tell you.
Yes.
What you see, not a collective experience.
You rely completely on cold hard data, right? I don't, because
data is the only way to see the larger picture.
No, it isn't. Because
how many people do you think are in your circle compared to how many people are involved in clinical trials and these studies that are involved over months and years?
In the diet field, I have more.
Phil.
Okay, and so I look at the other ones. All right, you asked me that question, so I thought I'd slip that in. And so I use pretty much the same method of deduction as I do with other. I listen to people's stories. I look in their eyes. I see that they are just horrendously damaged by these muzzles. And that, there are a lot of people talking about enormous psychological damage to children in schools.
Talking about it.
Child psychiatrists, people who I've heard.
Where's the evidence?
It's bloody obvious, Dan. You don't put a muzzle on a kid. They're screaming to have them taken off. You see the mothers trying to put them on small kids and they're screaming. It's child abuse, Dan.
I know children who are no longer required to wear a mask and they choose to continue doing it.
Yeah.
So what do you say to them?
Very, very
Are
sad.
they psychologically damaged?
Yeah.
Says who? You?
I would say so. I think that they've been fooled into thinking that health is about wearing a muzzle and not about getting your diet and your lifestyle right.
Oh, so infectious diseases aren't a part of health. If you're healthy, you can avoid all infectious disease. Is that what you're
Why
saying?
does it always have to be black and white? I would say that if we had spent
Because that's what you're implying here. You're implying here that if you're healthy, you don't need to wear a mask to reduce your risk of infectious disease.
if we'd have spent the time educating children in school and putting out on the mainstream media exactly how to stay healthy and telling
By
people
your method.
the ancestral method, Dan.
By your method.
The ancestral method, Dan.
It's your method.
And yours is the scientific method, Dan. You are science, like
It's not mine. It's not mine. It's what everybody, it's what every scientist, every good scientist goes by.
No,
It's how we gain knowledge.
Every good scientist, every scientist who agrees with you. Dan, don't you see we're exactly the
No.
same? We are
No,
both
Phil.
human beings who have the trend to look at what we like to see.
No, Phil. Scientists gather good data and other scientists look at that data. I don't care if Fauci comes out tomorrow and says we need 10 doses. I'm going to say, what? Where's the data? I don't care about him. I don't care about anyone's credentials.
Good, and
We look at data.
The data is hauled together by the people who are making the damn vaccines in the first place.
No, data is gathered by the scientific community, Phil. I told you that the studies done by Pfizer are verified and repeated through several different labs all across the world.
And so are all these studies.
So how do you say all of them are liars?
Absolute nonsense.
What?
So are the studies on diet that are absolute nonsense. They've all been repeated by people and they've all been verified and they've all been peer reviewed and they're
except the ones you like. Except the ones you like.
Except the ones that work, Dan.
Except the ones that you like.
But I don't really take any notice of them. I only bring them out when somebody starts shouting for studies like you. I see it happening. You know, I look at anthropology. What if you wanted to find out what a polar bear eats, do you need a study? You just look at what it eats in the wild. If you want to find out what a human eats,
that's a study where people go out and observe polar bears. That's a study.
Yes, and so you go out and observe indigenous tribes, and you tell me who's closer to the diet, my ideas or the WHO.
Indigenous tribes have multiple different diets across time, Phil. But you're relying on personal
seed oils.
You're relying on personal experience, your own biased personal experience and headlines. You're not looking at data, even though you said at the beginning of this conversation that you don't throw things out.
Why would you say that I just rely on headlines? I listen to these docs
because I've been listening to you, Phil, and the things you're repeating to me are things I see shared in misleading headlines.
But you consider them to be misleading because you're looking.
They are misleading because I do the work to find out what's actually true.
Dan,
for example, the thing about PCR testing.
And I'm just going to have to say, look, you are absolutely right about the scientific data. I just don't trust scientific data. This is where we're never going to get past this.
I know, but the thing you don't understand is that scientific data is a large collective experience. It's not just you and your bias. It's not your N of one.
But there are hundreds of thousands of docs speaking out against this now. That's huge. And they're all.
Where's their data? Where's their data? Again, I don't care what Fauci says. I want to see the data. Where's their data?
They have clinical experience on the front line. That's what's important.
Where's their data? So that's what clinical trials are. That's frontline experience, measured and documented.
And who has the finances to make those? The people who are pushing the vaccine.
The people who are treating their patients.
And they publish it. They put out loads of case studies. All these people have done it.
So they're all bought. They're all just bought to you.
Sorry, who is all bought?
All the people publishing these data that I'm talking about, they're all just bought. Is that what you're insinuating? Is that what you're implying?
No, I think there's some very good people in there, but who just haven't looked outside their particular field of science.
So they're just mistaken. They're all mistaken or bought, even though science is a self-examining, self-correcting field.
Yes, but it isn't a lot of the time. It's set up as a religion.
Well, it very much is.
Oh, good science is, Dan. But what I'm pointing to is that, you know, I get dietitians, very well qualified dietitians, onto me saying that you are not looking at the science and you're not looking at the data. But they're looking at the wrong data there. They're looking at the data that goes against our ancestral heritage. And so it isn't the correct data. And it is financed by the big food and the big pharma companies. And these are the people who finance the studies on diet and health.
So you don't think that big meat industry has a financial stake in any studies? That's not an issue you look out for?
Not really. There haven't really been any studies done by that. You know, they've
okay.
If you look at the studies that have been done, they're very small, they're very buried. They don't have the finances of the big food. Look at 60% of the American diets, like grains and seed oils.
So you excuse the possibility of
where the big money is, Dan. This is where the big money is.
So Phil, you excuse the possibility of a large multi-billion-dollar meat corporation influencing studies, but you hone in on the idea of other food corporations funding studies.
Well, look at it. Just look at it, Dan, and see which ones.
I mean, do you see the kind of problem?
Yes, I can, which is why there is a problem with studies in the first place. And you've got to look outside it. You've got to look at anthropology. You've got to look and see what.
No, you take the literature field as a whole. That's the best you can do. Is a study, you don't just take one study. You ask, is this consistent? Was it done well? Is it repeatable? Are other people finding the same thing? What does the whole data tell us together? What's the story, right? Don't leave anything out of the story. That's what scientists try to do.
Yes, and I've looked at those studies and they're obviously genocidal, you know, intentionally or not. They are, because I'm talking about the diet ones now, because honestly,
you are.
They look at it, you look at what people actually eat, and I have done, and there is many differences across the zones, you know, across the latitudes, but basically they are not eating anything that we are told is healthy now, which is grains and seed oils. And when those indigenous tribes have that brought in, like in Tanzania, they get brought in the ugali and the seed oils and all that sort of thing, they get fat and sick and they get diabetic. And this happens the world over. And this is the food that the WHO is pushing. And those are the majority of the studies show that is healthy and meat is unhealthy. They are wrong, Dan, 100% wrong.
Did you find a source saying that the WHO is pushing that, and that specifically?
No, but it's a party line of the WHO, has been for ages.
Okay,
because the people who are on the WHO on the committee are basically the Seventh-day Adventists, and you trace them back, and they have an enormous vegetarian and vegan agenda, and you can trace that back. You can see where that happened and where the science became corrupted. That is something I do know about.
Sure.
Okay. But I don't know so much. I'm just saying, Dan, all I'm saying is, like I said at the beginning, if something is so corrupt and it's involving roughly the same people and the same corporations, I cannot trust that science. And so I will doubt it, I will question, and I will come up with a better solution. And I believe wholeheartly that I have a better solution for the world than jabbing them all and making them wear muzzles. That's all I'm saying.
I'm saying you don't have any evidence for that.
Well, you don't think I have evidence for that.
I know you don't. You haven't shown me any.
Okay, I've
all of your objections to vaccination and masks.
I've shown you no evidence that you accept, because it's not presented in that narrow band of education that you have in microbiology, which is very impressive. But
no,
it's just one kind of narrow path that could be.
Phil, you don't get
on something completely wrong. You never know. Stefan Lanka might be right.
He's not. He's definitely not.
There you go. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't.
We have pictures of SARS-CoV-2 in high resolution. I don't know what else you want.
I don't know, Dan. I don't know.
Of course you don't. You don't try. You don't look to figure these things out. You just accept these things as some grand mystery that helps bolster the statements you already make. You don't do the work to figure it out, Phil.
Dan, you've done the work in your field, and that's great. You've convinced yourself of it, right? I don't have the time to do the massive amount of work that you've done with those studies. And I'm
And
not
don't
really,
talk about it
I'm
publicly.
not really interested.
Don't tell your audience that vaccines
Yeah,
don't
no,
work.
let me
Don't
finish.
tell them that they're harmful.
Let me finish. Because I have done the work in other areas which show that the solutions are rubbish and very, very damaging on so
Again, Phil, you can't have it both ways. You can't say
suicide rates are up, depression is up, everything's up.
Phil,
People have lost all their businesses because of this.
No, that's not true. But
It
Phil,
is true, Dan.
you have to, Phil, hang on one moment. Okay. You can't have it both ways. You can't say I'm not an expert in the stuff that I've researched and then say the solutions, meaning vaccines, masks, social distancing, that it's all garbage. You can't have it both ways. Okay?
I'm claiming I would like to have it both ways, and I'm claiming that I do. And you can say I don't, and that's fine. That's how
so you think it's okay to not understand any of the actual science around vaccines, testing, masks, and yet still say it's all garbage?
Yes, I do, actually, because I'm looking at different data.
That's a great, I think, cap to this conversation.
Yeah, well, that's easy for you to say, and you've forced me into a cul-de-sac of your own knowledge that has given.
I didn't force you in anything, Phil. These are all things you said.
No, you see, there's going to be so many people who will just say, oh, look, he's beaten him. And yes, you have on the studies, Dan, but that is not the big picture. You've got to take into consideration
so your experience is a bigger picture.
The enormous collateral damage about this, and all the stuff that it's causing around the world. It is destroying our society, Dan.
It's really not,
and it doesn't need to. You might be, if you're happy to take the jabs and to wear a muzzle, then it's not destroying your society and it's not affecting your profession. But it is to many people. And the bottom line in this, there should be body autonomy. People should have the choice to do whatever they want to do in this, not be forced and coerced into it. That is absolutely disgraceful. It's taking away our freedoms.
Someone that you spread SARS-CoV-2 to, and then they get hospitalized or die, they don't have bodily autonomy.
That's it. Look, if they've spent as much money as they do advertising this COVID enthusiasm, and spent the time telling people how to stay healthy, there would be,
which won't protect them against an infectious disease.
Yes, of course it would. It would be very, very few hospitalized, probably none dying. They should be given that choice, but they're not. They're just pushing this one solution. And it's not
one solution. There's a whole toolbox of solutions that you disagree with all of them.
Yeah, because there's better ones. If that was
show me the data that your solution is better.
Okay, you show me people with high vitamin D status and good deuterium levels and no comorbidities whatsoever who have died.
Yeah, there are plenty of children just in the past few months who have been hospitalized with COVID who had no outstanding comorbidities.
Outstanding comorbidities, Dan.
Yeah, no obvious.
I go further down the track from that. These kids would have been eating what the bloody WHO told them to eat, probably.
Oh, so you're assuming their diet was terrible and that's why they got hospitalized. That's it.
99% of humans' diet is terrible, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
according to you, because they don't eat like you. That's your whole thing, Phil. It's just like you haven't presented anything really.
They don't eat local, seasonal, ancestrally appropriate diet. If they did, they would not be in this kind of mess. There's
no one ancestral diet.
Exactly.
Phil, you're
a local, seasonal, ancestral appropriate diet.
And Phil, you haven't shown any evidence that is going to protect people against severe outcomes of infectious disease or COVID.
I have.
All you have is your word. All you have is I think.
Trouble with it.
Hang on, Phil.
People who eat like that, I don't see them having any trouble with it, but on other pages I do. Okay, that's my and that's a good cross section, right? That's 40,000 odd people. That's not bad, Dan. That's more than you have on your social media, right? And
Phil, you can go to any social media account, any social media group with of any diet and find people saying the exact same thing,
No, you
that
can't.
it's miraculous,
No,
that it
you
cured
can't.
them, that it helped them. Yes, you can, Phil.
No, you can't. No, you really
Here,
can't.
look here. So you're kind of just saying the same thing over and over again. And
I think
we've
we
been going almost 2 hours. So let me just kind of wrap up my thoughts here. Is that okay?
Of course, carry on.
So I think what happened with you is you had some genuine health issues that put you in a lot of distress. And you tried some different diets. They didn't work for you. And then you tried your current diet, and that diet worked for you. And now, because that diet got you out of your really genuinely stressful and debilitating situation, you think that everybody has to abide by it. And you also think that it's demonstrated to you that the science is all incorrect because one diet worked for you. And now I think that you've taken that and carried that distrust to everything, including things that kind of might compromise your belief, where, you know, your diet, you believe your diet keeps you ultimately healthy. An infectious disease is going to challenge that. So you're now distrusting and rejecting all of the science that has to do with infectious diseases. And I think that that's where you've kind of pigeonholed yourself into this corner where you must believe that your diet works and that the science is wrong, but you've misinterpreted the science, which actually says that any diet can work. And I think that you're taking it too far and you're spreading misinformation to people who trust you, even though you don't do the work to follow up on these claims that you spread to people. Those are my thoughts here. And I do hope that you reconsider what you're saying and maybe stop to think before you post things online or say them to your community, such as where are all the tests for Delta and Omicron, or these vaccines are harmful. Like just think for a minute and take an honest look at the data.
Dan, in that little summary, it is clear that you have completely misinterpreted the breadth of what I do, and that I've found one diet that I think everybody should take, like some sort of a militant vegan. You've all the way through our email exchanges and through this, you've completely misinterpreted everything that I am about. You have no understanding of what it is that I actually tell people to do. I say tell people to do, suggest that they try. And they do, and there is
you tell them to avoid the
a
vaccine.
lot of no. I listen to your abuse for silently, and you know there is a very powerful amount of science behind that. When you actually, for example, look at our digestive system, it is pretty much a facultative carnivore. It's pretty much like a hyena, and that's good enough, man. That is good enough. And you look at that, and that is why this works, because it's our ancestral diet. And there is no one ancestral diet that's going to cure it, but sometimes you have to go back to a very strict elimination diet for a while to allow the gut to heal, to allow the deuterium levels in the body to lower in the mitochondria. And then you get tremendous results. And then absolutely people should reintroduce whatever they like, seasonal, local, but ignore the WHO, who say that we should be eating grains and seed oils. These are the two biggest things. And without those two, pretty much without those two, the population would be 10 times healthier all across the board. You don't have to go as extreme as I do. I don't recommend that to anybody unless they're trying to heal the gut, which is the root of autoimmune conditions. And then you see very spectacular successes with that. That's all I'm saying. And I think that the world's focus would be much better spent being on that than it would be on these measures that take away our autonomy, ruin our social, ruin our societies, create two-tier societies, set families against each other, and create this horrific situation that's happened because of the response to this COVID thing, right? That's what I'm saying. That's all. I don't think that makes me a bad guy at all, because I have done the work. I've done 40 years of work in this area. And I know that it's more effective in people's health than any pharmaceutical intervention has ever been, which has never cured a chronic disease. never cured, never. But I see reversals of them day in, day out.
And people who tell their children to drink bleach will say the same thing without any data. So
Dan,
let me know when you have data, okay? Let me know when you have data.
There is data. There's
Let me
whole
know.
civilizations, Dan.
You can go ahead and show me the data.
Look at the civilizations. Look at what they eat. There is your data. Whole civilizations, Dan.
You can
and
show
that to
me
me is the cap.
show me the data.
I have done, and you haven't looked at it.
No, I've looked at it. You haven't shown me any data that what you're saying is better than the measures we have to control an infectious disease that we have no immune memory to.
That's because nobody's tried it except for the people in my circle, which is a very big circle.
So write up your results and publish them.
Can't be asked, Dan.
Get your doctors to do it.
We need to get rid of this absolute obsession with science funded by big corporations. And we need to look at the massive amount of data that comes from social media, people talking, people putting their case histories across. We need to look at proper doctors.
So social media is data.
Chabatot and Zofia Clements, a paleomediciner in Hungary.
So you're saying that social media
interpret the data, like Paul Saladino, for example, or Sean Baker. And we look at these docs who are visibly, unbelievably healthy and far more than people in other sort of like the emaciated vegan docs and whatever, for example. And you look at these people, and that is where knowledge comes from, as well as cold, hard studies. Financed by corporations.
But you want to cut out the cold, hard studies thing.
I don't want to cut it out, Dan. I just don't have any real need for it.
You ignore it. You flat out ignore it. So, okay, so it's interesting that you say social media is data when social media is really just a feedback loop of an algorithm showing you what you want to see. So
these are real people.
I think you're going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. And if you don't want to, show me anything that actually demonstrates that vaccines or masks or anything like that is bad and that your thing is good and better, then I don't think that there's a reason for us to continue.
No, fair enough.
All right. Well, I mean, I wish you well, and I wish that you would think twice before you spread messages to your community.
And I feel the same about you, Dan. And we both think that we're spreading genocidal misinformation. But I know that you're a good guy, and I know that you have no bad intention towards anybody except maybe me, because you do get frustrated with me, and that's okay. That's understandable.
And you go on very long, ranty tirades attacking me too, so that's fine.
I don't attack you. I defend myself because
you do. It's
you're
okay.
always you're part of that cancel culture where you have to keep on telling me in emails, you can't talk about that. You're just waffling. And eventually it's like, Dan, this is me.
I never tell you can't talk about it. I tell you I don't care about it.
Well, there we go. You see, you don't care about it.
Yeah, because you messaged me first talking about masks, and then you went on long rants about diet, which I responded, I don't want to talk about that. I don't care.
Dan,
not interested. Sorry.
I spoke to you,
and you kept doing it and getting mad at me.
I spoke to you initially for one reason and one reason only, and that is because my ex-friend Rick Archer has decided to sort of demonize me, mostly because of the information that he gets from you. Every time he makes a comment, it's have you listened to Dan Wilson, and he's getting that from me, so from you. And so I thought, I'm going to show him that I'm really not a baddie and I'm thinking outside the box. And to be honest, I think it's sad that I've lost my friendship with Rick Archer through this. And that is the thing, that's the reason why I spoke to you in the first place. It was to do with our mutual friend, Rick Archer. I would never have contacted you. I'd never have spoken to you. That's no offense whatsoever, not because I disapprove or anything. Our paths.
I don't care.
Exactly. No, our paths just wouldn't have crossed. But they.
I could read the very angry post you made about Rick too. But Phil,
well, Dan, there's no need to bring Rick into this in that sense. But yes,
you brought up Rick, so
he did something that he said he would never do, and that's what upset me really. So, it didn't seem like much of a thing that a friend would do. But hey, I'm over that. And I've talked civilly to Rick, and sometimes he's responded, and sometimes he hasn't since. And I would like it if we would just be on different sides of this, Rick and I, and talk as laymen and have a little joke with each other about each other's beliefs. And that was great, but this is just another symptom to me of the division that happens with this, because honestly, I have no problem. Dan, I think our interactions have been kind of fascinating. If I was in a room with you, I'd go, oh, Dan, all right, man, let's have a drink. I'll give you a hug. I don't really mind what you believe. To me, it doesn't make you into a bad person. You see, you sort of squint at that. But my thing,
I don't want to touch you. It's fine.
Exactly, fine. That's okay. But this is the division here. The COVID enthusiasts seem to be the very hostile ones, and we're just, hey, whatever. Believe what you like, think what you like, allow us to believe what we like for the reasons that we believe it. And that is freedom, Dan. That's free.
Again, the problem comes when you're saying things that lead people to believe that certain things are not true, and the things that you want them to believe instead are actually doing harm. And beyond that, it's a problem when you're not doing the honest work to figure out whether or not what you're saying is accurate. That's problematic. Okay. And that's all I ask. That's all I ask that you do. That's all I ask that you do, is that you take an honest look at the data.
You're always kind of hinting that I'm dishonest. I'm not. I just have questions. And I believe that what you're putting out there,
because Phil, listen,
because you don't understand completely the side about, you think I've discovered some funny diet. You don't realize that it goes across the whole aspect of our emotional and lifestyle, light, everything that I look at for my clients. And it does do extraordinary things when you put yourself back into the state we're supposed to be as human beings, not as zoo animals living in these cages under this artificial light and all this stuff that wrecks the mitochondrial functioning. All right.
Sure. So I'm just going to say one more time.
Understand the depth of what it is that I actually get into. You think you're putting out to your audience that I'm some guy who's found some weird diet that's absolutely mad, right? And that isn't me at all. So it's a huge misinterpretation of who I am and what I put out there. If I'm wrong about a couple of things,
a lot of things.
All right. No, well, that's your opinion. But
no, it's not my opinion. It's just objectively you say wrong things about COVID all the time.
But what I do for human health on this planet and the results that I see far outweigh any damage that I'm doing, if I'm doing any at all, which I doubt. The same cannot be said of you if you're wrong.
I'd say that
catastrophic damage.
I'd say that's kind of a delusion of grandeur for you, but
no.
We know, we have the data already. We know that vaccines work. We know masks work. And I don't know what more you want, but you don't look at the data. You reject it. And I think that just going back to the example I already brought up about honesty, is the fact that I answered your question about how to distinguish Delta from Omicron in an email. And then after that, you still perpetuated this myth that there's no test to distinguish between them. And that's dishonest.
Have I not conveyed the subtlety of that? That most doctors don't know that, and most tests are being done at home. People do this home testing, and then they have no idea whether they have Delta, Omicron, or whatever. You're trying to paint me as being dishonest by saying
again, Phil, that this is dishonest because you're talking about rapid tests, which in order to be confirmed as a case have to be followed up with PCR.
Yeah, which they seldom are. People just do them and then they throw them in the bin and that's it, and report into their employer or whatever, or whether they put orange juice on it if they want to get a week off, or whether they've said it's negative when they don't want it to be a positive and they throw it in the bin.
No, they have to confirm it
out there about that. So, there's human error and whatever their own agenda is about whether they want the test to be positive or negative. And that isn't the case all the time, but it is the case.
That's not how it works.
Oh, okay.
You don't get to decide if a test is positive or negative. You just don't.
No. But a lot of people report their own tests in, right? They just get trusted to do it at home and then they make up.
Most employers are going to ask that they get a PCR test to confirm before they take off work.
Yes, I would accept that, but not all. But I'm just pointing out grey areas
So
here in what I've said and whatever. I'm not
you're not,
knowingly
Phil, this isn't
dishonest. I have
your
no
mess.
need to be. You're
Phil, your
forcing me
message
into a
was not
conversation.
gray.
You're always trying to force me into a conversation about your particular area of speciality, which I've looked at a little bit, enough to know
Because you talk about
that
COVID.
my area of speciality is far more effective on a global scale, does less harm, does not transfer so much riches to the existing billionaires and corporations.
So you say with no evidence.
Well, it's not evidence that convinces you, Dan, because it's not.
It's nothing. You haven't.
Okay,
it's nothing.
I think. Do you think that's maybe enough? We're going round and round a bit. They're probably even boring your audience there. With
we are going around and around, but yeah. So get to the rest of your day. Thanks for chatting, and I hope that you again truly consider looking into honestly the statements you make about COVID before you post them.
I do, but
you don't.
Not to your standards.
You don't at all.
Butt up against that. That's it.
You don't at all, and I hope that changes. That's all.
Okay. Thanks for the lecture, Dad.
You're welcome, son.
Cool. Well, nice to end on a little chuckly note there, Dan. And cool. Nice to speak to you after all this time. And it was as expected. And there we go.
I agree.
That's cool.
All right. I will see you later, maybe. I don't know.
All right. We'll see. I'll see you on the other side. We'll see what's going on.
All right. Bye-bye.
See ya.